Let's shift the paradigm to prioritize our peace and focus on the positive while creating balance to make living our best life the ultimate goal. We'll talk boundaries, self-care, mental health, and overcoming obstacles. You'll hear interviews and fresh perspectives to support you along the way. Let's elevate the conversation and level up our self-growth game. This is the Piece of Me podcast. As soon as I sat down to record this episode, I looked over my show notes and realized that I'm really cramming a lot of stuff into one episode. And I probably should break this all into maybe 2 episodes, but there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in life right now, and things are it's just busy. It's just kind of chaotic. So I figured, you know what? The show must go on. And I did promise you guys that I was going to jump on the mic and record and get this episode out tomorrow. And it kind of interrupts my podcast flow a little bit. But again, we've got a lot of stuff to cover. So let's do it. All right, so let's get into things. We have a lot to talk about in today's episode. And one of those things is really just a celebration of the last year here on the Piece of Me podcast, which is really kind of wild that it's been 1 year. So we're going to talk about that. And with that, I'm going to answer your questions that you sent to me on Instagram, just really wanting to know some of the behind the scenes stuff, some of the stuff that people might not tell you about podcasting, but also, kind of the, my take on it, my experience over the last 12, 13-ish months, and kind of tell you about my favorite guests, my worst guests, if I'm making any money doing this, and all that good stuff. So we're going to get into that. We're also going to talk a little bit about a confession. Yeah, I have a confession to make, kind of tied in with the podcast stuff, but I'll get to that a little bit later. And also why my wellness goals for 2024 have been canceled by yours truly. And that all happened by this month, February. They were out the door. They didn't really last long after I set them in one of my previous episodes for my kind of New Year's intentions or resolutions, some of the goals I had set up. I'm very focused on wellness, and I still am, but some of those goals went right out the window. And I think I know why. I'm going to share that with you in this episode. And I also want to touch on a topic that it just kind of bothers me. And it's really about how some other podcasters, or influencers rather, kind of have us fooled. And I kind of feel like, some of these that I follow for a while, I feel like I've kind of sniffed through some of the BS. And I kind of think that I'm going to share some of that stuff with you today because, we're all in this together. We're so in the world of social media and stuff being on the internet. So I just figured I would share some of that with you. And I'm going to give you a life update because life has been crazy. And if you do follow me on Instagram, I actually just posted on my story that I'm sitting here in this kind of Sherpa fleece lined, kind of oversized cardigan. I just took all my makeup off, did my skincare. My self-care game has been really elevated currently because of my life updates, which I'm going to get to. But I've really been I want to get cozy with you. I want to have a real and raw conversation. So I was like, yeah, taking the earrings out, taking off the makeup, do the skincare, put on the comfy clothes. I poured myself a fresh glass of water, a lot of ice. And I hope that if you're driving to work right now, or maybe you're driving home, if you are somewhere where it's a cold climate, get cozy because this might wind up being a little bit longer of an episode than I intend to because we do have a lot of stuff to talk about and I might be jumping around a little bit, but I'm going to try to stay on course as much as possible so that you get what you came here for. But yeah, so if you're in your car, get cozy. If you're home, maybe pour yourself a glass of whatever you like and you enjoy. And let's just kind of let's get into things because it's just me and you, right? It's just me and you here, not the whole internet, not the whole world. And but we are here to have a good time. So if you are new to the Piece of Me podcast, let me say welcome. I so appreciate that you're here and I appreciate if you're coming back. So if you are new here, welcome. If you're not new, welcome back. My name is Lexy Lee. I am the host and creator of the Piece of Me podcast, and we are celebrating 1 year, which I am calling my podiversary, my podcast anniversary. So 1 year here on the podcast, and I am going to start today's episode by getting into some of your questions that you sent my way through Instagram. So that said, let me also stop here and say that if you are not already following the show, if somebody told you about this podcast, not sure how you maybe stumbled upon me. Maybe we know each other. Maybe we have crossed paths in life. I do have some, grade school friends, things like that, who have come and supported the show. And I so appreciate that. So if you are not already following the podcast, do me a quick favor. Hit the check mark. It's a follow. It's like a check mark follow. Or there might be 3 little dots all next to each other. If you click those 3 little dots, it will give you an option to follow this podcast. If you could do me a favor, if you click on the check mark or those 3 dots and click the follow button, it will just show me that you're out there. Because in the world of analytics and podcasting, there's not a lot of information. We get some information on our listeners and where you guys are, some of your demographics, like your age and some things like that, but not a lot of stuff. So for me, by you clicking that, it just supports me. It lets me know you're out there. It lets me know that you're here, and it lets me know to keep going, which is always a good thing, right? Because as I sit here looking at a dark screen, because I am off camera, and it's a Sunday night, it's actually 6:15 Sunday night, and this episode is coming out. It's actually going to be released in about 7 hours. So I have a lot to get through. So yes, hit that follow button. And also if you are on social media, come follow me. Let's be friends on Instagram. I am the most active on Instagram than any other platform. So it's Piece of Me Podcast on Instagram, Piece of Me Podcast. I do have a website and I do have my link tree updated on Instagram. And my link tree just has all of the links to all of my platforms. So you can come and subscribe on YouTube. You can come follow me on TikTok, which I will tell you a little secret. My cat is more popular on TikTok than I am. That's okay. But I am the most active on Instagram. So coming over, I put a lot of content. I post, I do polls, I do all kinds of stuff, but I'm very interactive and I would love to engage with you on Instagram. So Piece of Me Podcast. And as you know, because you probably found this show, PEACE, because it's all about the peace. So as we get into things here, let's get into celebrating the podcast anniversary, which is really cool. And I will say it's a very exciting place to be, to look back and think, I can't believe it's been a year. I cannot believe it's been a year. And a lot has changed in the year. You know, my editing software has changed. My microphone has changed. Some of my content a little bit has changed, but we're still kind of focusing on, the peace, positivity, and balance to live our best life, because we only get one. And so let's make the most of it. But we're talking a lot about navigating relationships, friendships, and all that stuff. But most importantly, all the changes that come as we kind of shift through life and we learn how to kind of balance things. That's really all the good stuff we talk about here on the podcast. But so for the most part, topics are kind of similar. But we've had a lot of new guests on the podcast. We are in season 3. We have 50 episodes now under the Piece of Me podcast belt, which is pretty wild. And here we are. So I'm going to answer some of your questions that you guys were kind enough to send me on Instagram. I had asked you guys a few weeks ago if you would tell me what you really wanted to know about podcasts, and really specifically about mine, maybe what my interests are in other podcasts, who my favorite guests were, how much money am I making, and what did it cost me to set up my own podcast, kind of all that stuff. And I have a feeling I might have other podcasters that tune into this, but which if you guys are listening, I appreciate you. And the fellow podcaster community is been amazing. It's a lot of creative people here who really enjoy this platform. And it really created a positive space for those who want to connect with listeners around the world like you guys. So it's such a cool place to be. So let me answer one of the first questions that came in. Let's see here. What has been the hardest part about podcasting? That's the question. What's been the hardest part? For me, I will tell you that scheduling the guests has been the hardest part, because everybody is so busy. And a lot of times my guests are in different time zones, sometimes different countries, and they have other things going on too. So when you're trying to balance your family life, your work life, your schedules, all the things, sometimes the hardest part is just finding a time that you both can record. And usually when that happens, it's several weeks from the time that you're actually talking to your guests. So a lot of it is that. I would say biggest surprise. So somebody had asked me on Instagram, what's been the biggest surprise? And I think, again, if I have other podcasters listening right now, I think they're going to nod their heads when I say this, because I know I'm not alone. But I will say that sometimes you put in a lot of effort into an episode. a certain topic or a certain guest. And it takes time, again, to find that right guest, come up with the questions. Hopefully you have a great conversation recorded, you edit it, you do all the things, you promote it, and then the episode is released. And sometimes it's a flop, like a total flop. And you think it's going to be a home run. But then when you look at your analytics, you look at your downloads, your streams, and it's like, oh, really? Okay, I guess that wasn't a home run. I thought everybody would really enjoy this topic, and guess I was wrong. So I would say the biggest surprise when it comes to podcasting, at least in my experience thus far, has been when I think certain episodes are going to be a total home run, and they're not. And then the episodes I think are going to be a flop or like not so hot, let's say, are a home run. Like they'll get more downloads than some of the other episodes. And I'm still kind of trying to figure out why. But again, I know other podcasters have kind of, tried to figure this one out too. It's like the unsolved mystery. Why is it certain episodes do better? So, and that will come into play when I talk a little bit about my confession that's coming up. But yeah, sometimes it's really surprising to see the episodes that do really well and the ones that don't. All right. So best part. What's been the best part? Well, obviously, I think taking the risk and trying something new is super cool. But trying something new a little bit later in life, it can be intimidating. And technology has certainly changed over time. And when you are a solo podcaster, it's a lot on your own plate to learn, to figure all this stuff out. So it is really cool to try something new and to get the support that you do get from your people, from your listeners, from the people that care about you and the ones that enjoy your content. But I will also say one of the other best parts is really just meeting the guests. It's so cool because for me, I truly enjoy people's stories. I love to hear about people's journey. I love to hear why people made the decisions they made. And I'm fascinated when people take risks in life. You've heard on this podcast before, the midlife gap year mom. She was actually my age and she left a corporate job and had a family, had kids and a husband, and said, yeah, the corporate 9 to 5, I'm taking a year off. So she took a midlife gap year. We hear gap years talked about when kids are between high school and college. And I think that's so fascinating. How did you actually make that happen? People dream about it. People think about it. But how did you make it happen? I have another guest who was on here and I spoke with her. Her name was Amanda. She came on the show in the fall. She talked about how she's Canadian and lives in Canada. And she always wanted to live in a different country. And she's not married. She has no kids. And here she took this huge leap by moving to Mexico to live her best life. And I've shared with you guys in that episode, actually, how I found her. And it's a true story, but I saw her on TV. I literally saw her on House Hunters International and I thought, oh my gosh, she's awesome. Like she's living her best life. She is exactly what this podcast is about. And anyway, so people who make those types of risks, they take those risks, they take a leap, they just they go for their dreams. I love that. I'm so motivated by it, inspired, and I love to hear people's stories. And even if people don't have a story where they're moving to another country or they're quitting their job or they're doing something super drastic, we all have had experiences, we've had traumas, we've had celebrations and wonderful things that have happened in our lives, and everything shapes us to be who we are. And I'm truly fascinated to hear why people make the turns in life that they do, why they go this way or that way, and why certain experiences affect them or don't affect them. Like it's just something that I genuinely enjoy with people. So I really just love having these conversations on the podcast and sharing them with you, having people who are vulnerable and come on here to share their story and open up with the world, because that's what we're doing. And that's one of my favorite or best parts is just learning people's stories. And also I always get something out of it. When I talk to a guest, there's always something that it leaves me with, whether it's inspirational or it's, maybe a little motivation, maybe it's a little validation, for feeling or thinking a certain way. All right. So I'm going to get to the next question, which is, why did I decide to do podcasting? Now, the hard answer, I don't even know it's hard, but there are so many podcasts that are out there. So this is a very saturated market, very saturated space, and it is hard to stand out when you have a lot of other podcasts that might be talking similar topics. So that is challenging. But why I wanted to do podcasting. So for just quick background, I've spent many, many years behind a microphone in my life, not necessarily talking, but whether I was in recording studios with music, theater, or working in radio, I have spent many, many years of my life behind a microphone. And also why I decided podcasting is because I personally enjoy podcasts. I've actually noticed a huge shift from always listening to music all the time, which I loved. I still love music. I really do. But I've shifted. I've shifted from listening to music to listening to almost, like talk radio and getting all the important stuff. And then from talk radio, because gosh, sometimes the news is just so heavy and you just need a little bit of a break, to podcasts and finding topics I enjoy and just getting bite-sized pieces of information whenever I want to listen. All right, so let's get into some of the really good questions that I know you guys want to know. You want to know if I make money, and if I do, how much? And I'm going to be honest with you guys. My response to this is not going to be probably a typical response. And I'll explain why in a second. But let me answer. How much money do I make if I make money? Do I make money? The answer is no, I don't. I do not make any money on this podcast, which surprises a lot of people. And I'm going to answer why. So I obviously don't make any money, so there's no amount to give you. But this is by choice, and I'll tell you why. So even though the show, the Piece of Me podcast, is eligible for sponsors, for the little bit of money and all the extra work I would do to have a sponsor or a commercial into an episode, one, I don't think you guys would enjoy it. Two, I feel like I would just be doing it to do it. And three, I don't really feel like they'd probably be a good fit. So until I find really the right sponsor, to me, it's more about building the Piece of Me podcast community. And to me, that means less commercials. Again, I worked in radio. So one of the biggest things I've learned is commercials are when people find another station, they flip around. They want to find something that's going to give them what they want. So with a podcast episode, having too many commercials, it takes away from your content. I want you guys to be here. I want you guys to enjoy. And so maybe down the road. So that's really the reason I have decided no to doing any sponsors and commercials. To those out there who have maybe a passion of starting a podcast, you really don't need to spend any money. You don't. And it sounds crazy, but the thing you're listening to this show on right now, which is probably your cell phone, it could be your computer, but it's probably your cell phone. You can actually start a podcast for free right now on your cell phone. It's true. Now, your editing capability or your microphone quality might not be to the level that you want, but you could actually start a podcast right now. So, and I share that because I want it to inspire you that if this is something you want to do, go out and do it. So that a year from now, you too are sitting here saying, hey, I'm celebrating an anniversary of your own podcast. Okay, so let's talk about what people will be surprised to learn about me. So you guys kind of asked me questions of, my interests, a little bit about me. I did just share that kind of my background, being behind a microphone, and I'm just kind of comfortable here. Probably the biggest surprise for people is that I do have a full-time job, and this is my passion project, but it does not pay the bills, as I just mentioned to you guys. I do not collect money from this, although I have invested a lot of money into my podcast. So I am several thousand now invested. But again, this is a passion for me. And I hope you guys enjoy it, which is, again, why I ask you guys if you can support back by following this show. Come on over to Instagram, to the Piece of Me podcast. That stuff means something because I am putting, my own dollars into this because I want to be here with you. And I want to keep growing this community so we keep having these great conversations and these great guests. So I want to get into some of the fun stuff. Who was my favorite guest? Who was my worst guest? I'm going to answer that. But before I do, some of you asked what's next for the podcast. And I will say there are some things that I've got cooking because I am creative. So I'm always thinking about the show and what I can do to make it more fun for you guys. So there are some more giveaways coming. Might start to get into those video episodes, as I mentioned. And I've got a new segment that I'm kind of sitting on it thinking, this might come out in season 4. Good stuff for you guys to look forward to. And again, if you really want to be on the cusp of what's coming, follow me on Instagram, Piece of Me Podcast, because I kind of tease stuff. And I also ask you guys what you like. So if you want to have your voice heard, if you want to have some input, come on over to the podcast page on Instagram because, you can tell me what you're really thinking. You can tell me what topics you want to hear. And that's the input I appreciate from you guys. Who is my favorite guest on the Piece of Me podcast? Okay, so I don't actually have a specific person, but I will tell you the qualities that make a favorite guest. Okay, favorite guests on this show are people who are excited to be on the podcast. Now, when somebody is excited to be on the Piece of Me podcast, I'm going to reference my own to be specific here. These are people who are excited. They bring a certain kind of energy and they help promote the show. My favorite guests are those who just bring that positive energy. They have a story, they have something they want to share, and they're just excited to be here. So that's always just appreciated from a podcast hoster's perspective. You want people who want to be on the show, right? Like it sounds like a simple thing, but that's not always the case. So that kind of brings me to my next question, which is, who was my worst guest? And I'm going to tell you, I am going to protect this person's name because I am not here to put this person all over, the internet world in any negative way. I don't want to do that. But I do want to tell you guys why this person was my worst guest, because I said I was going to be real and raw in this episode. So I got to be real and raw with you. Now, my worst guest is somebody who you actually never heard because I never recorded her episode. Yeah. So let me tell you a little story behind this. Months ago, within the first year of the podcast, I had a guest who was a little bit of a stretch to be on the show. But after talking with her several times, we found some topics that would work. And she had a podcast too, but her podcast was in a completely different direction. But again, we had some common threads or some similarities where we thought, okay, this is going to work. So after a couple times of having to schedule and reschedule our recording times and several emails, even a couple of phone conversations, just kind of talking through what the episode was going to be, the topics, the questions, all that kind of good stuff, we finally had something scheduled. And even while we talked, though, I will tell you, I felt like it wasn't the right fit. Like she wasn't the right fit. Her topic wasn't the right fit. And I felt that even in the conversation. Then what happened was when her and I went to record, there was an issue and we had a technology glitch. But it was how she handled it. She was extremely rude. She was extremely put off. And her whole energy just didn't fit the Piece of Me podcast vibe. After all this happened, I felt terrible that her recording kept getting botched. And she was blaming me. It really rubbed me the wrong way. So after feeling just terrible that this glitch kept interrupting her, when we finally connected, I said to her, let's reschedule this for the future. Let's just kind of put it on the back burner. And when we hung up the phone, I knew in that very moment that I was never going to call her again. Never. I was never going to call her again. She was never coming on the podcast. Everything in me said, this person is not a fit. And it was such an uncomfortable recording experience as it was that she really was the worst guest that you guys never heard. And I will also tell you one other thing I did. As soon as I hung up the phone, I felt really kind of riled up. I felt bad. I felt anxious. I felt a lot of different things because we had a lot of conversations and exchanged emails. And, there was a lot that went into that day and it kind of felt like it was all for nothing. But later that night, after I thought more about this, and I realized even more how bad of a fit she was anyway, that this worked out the way it was supposed to, I decided to delete her phone number out of my phone. And I've never talked to her since. Still, never spoke to her again. And there was some peace to me that brought, knowing that I had severed the tie and that I was never going to reach out. And she's never reached out to me either. And I think we both kind of just know it's just not a good fit for either one of us. And we're moving on. And something is still kind of brewing or it's kind of just lingering. It's there for a reason. So if you're listening to this right now, whether it's a podcast for you or whether it's anything else, if you're always thinking about it, if your brain always goes back to it, if it's something you journal about, whatever it is, and I talk about that. I talk about pattern popping in one of my previous episodes when it comes to journaling. Or if it's something you share with a friend of yours, maybe every time you're with a friend, you always talk about starting a business. You talk about starting a side hustle, whatever it is. There's a reason you keep talking about it because it interests you. So explore that. And really make some time. Maybe it's in the next couple days, just even at night. Instead of scrolling your socials, maybe do a little more research on that thing that interests you. And and maybe a year from now, you're going to be celebrating your 1-year anniversary of maybe your brick and mortar store, or of your new website, of a book that you wrote, or of a podcast you started. Yeah, let's talk about the confession. I've kind of teased this a couple times, but with everything I just said, and I don't want this to come across like, how can you be celebrating, but now you have this confession? They kind of go hand in hand. And let me explain why. The confession is that there are times that I feel that I just want to put the podcast on pause for a really long time, or just throw the towel in. Yeah, and walk away. Now, before you guys go crazy as you listen to that, because you might be thinking, wait, hold on, you just said, I get it. When you put so much effort and so much time and so much, even money, as I told you guys, I'm well invested, out of pocket costs, heavily invested into my podcast. But between all the scheduling, between all the things, sometimes what feels like so much fun and exciting and a passion starts to feel more like obligation. And not obligation in the sense of, oh, I have to do my podcast, because I love my podcast. I love being on here, especially if it's just you and I, and maybe the whole internet world. But it's you and I on here just chatting, talking about life, and just, shooting the breeze. But there are times where, when I talked about those analytics and seeing how, you put in a lot of time for an episode and it just flops, or you kind of go in a certain direction with certain things, topics, whatever it might be, and it just doesn't resonate. And you think, oh, maybe these guys don't like what I'm creating, what you spent all this time thinking about. And all of us do this at some point or another. I think this is a common thing. And I share this not to discourage you, but to hopefully make you feel validated, that if there's anything you have ever gone after, if there's anything you've tried or attempted, you took a risk at, and maybe it didn't go exactly the way you envisioned it in the beginning. Okay, maybe it went better, maybe it didn't. But no matter which direction you went, you kind of felt like, wow, I thought that was going to go a little bit better, or I thought the results were going to look better, or whatever. It's kind of like going to the gym, right? You have this vision of, I'm going to feel a certain way after I've been, maybe after I do 75 hard, or after I've been at the gym for 6 months, or after I've lost 20 pounds. We all think we're going to be in a certain place in a certain time frame. We do in our jobs. Hey, after I've worked in a job for so many years, I expect to be promoted, or I expect to make so much money, right? There's all these different things. We're in a relationship. Hey, we've been dating for a year. I would think we'd be married by then, or maybe we're going to have kids by a certain point. We all kind of put timestamps. I shouldn't say we all, but many of us put a timestamp on different things in our life. And sometimes that happens with the podcast. And I am a solo podcaster, which means I don't have a social media team. That means I don't have an editor or producer. I don't have anybody that schedules my guests. I don't have anybody that creates anything. It's all me. And I love that, because I'm very much hands-on. I'm creating the content, I'm managing, I'm the one that's involved with everything. But that also means, because I do have a full-time job and, other obligations in life, that sometimes I could use a hand. I could use a little bit of help, but it's hard when you try something and you feel like it's not resonating. Like you wonder, do these guys like it? Should I shift directions? Should I do different topics? So there are times where it's like, oh, maybe I'm not doing as well as I thought I was doing. Yes, I appreciate the fact that this podcast has reached 16 countries. That's awesome. It's really amazing. But we've been at 16 countries for a couple months now. So that's where I get in my own head and wonder, but I haven't hit the 17th country. I haven't hit the 18th country. How come? Is my content not good enough? See what I mean? So even though sometimes people say, wow, you always sound so confident, I only share this not to get empathy or anything like that. Not why I'm sharing this, but just that we all have moments of weakness. We all have moments where we question our effort, we question our output, and we wonder, are we doing the right thing? So I only share that confession again just to make you feel like you're not alone. I'm out here on a very public platform, and a lot of times people say to me, you're doing great. People love what you got. They find mental health topics helpful. They find self-care beneficial. They appreciate these guests and the stories, but sometimes you do wonder, am I doing the right thing? But I think that when we have these real conversations, I think people feel seen and validated and heard, because we're all going through stuff at different times, and we're all going to question our own talents, skills, and our effort. All right. So all of that said, speaking of maybe not achieving our goals as much, I just want to give you a quick update on why my wellness goals for 2024 really went quickly out the window. Didn't even really make it to February. And I kind of know why. So this is going to be a quick touch on this topic, but I'm a big journaler. You guys know that. And that's kind of what's been helping me realize why these wellness goals are not happening, rather. Talking to another guest whose episode is coming out very soon here on the podcast. I'm excited for you guys to hear her. She talked about self-care, or she's going to talk about self-care rather. One of the things she talks about is self-care has to be something that resonates with your own love language. Think about that. So your self-care has to resonate with your own love language. So she gives an example in her episode. Again, it's coming soon. But she had a friend of hers who would once a month go for a massage. But for her, she didn't feel rejuvenated. She didn't feel refreshed. She actually felt the opposite. And what it turned out to be was her love language, which for her, she doesn't like to be touched. So she doesn't actually like people touching her. And here she is going for a monthly massage. Well, that might be why it doesn't feel like self-care. It's not something that speaks to her love language. What I've realized is the way that I recharge my own self-care is taking things off my plate. It's not feeling like, oh, I have to do this thing 3 times a week. So instead, how I'm recharging, I am delegating right now. And we're going to get into that in a second. But for me, it's the journaling. It's having time alone. It's having the peace and quiet in the house. It's just having some time to just disconnect. And that's what's really recharging my batteries. And it's really helping me with the wellness part of my 2024 goal. Life is crazy. It's a little busy. It's a busy season, which is fine. It happens. But things have been crazy. So a little bit, I don't want to get too much into it because it's not my business to share. So I kind of keep this at a 10,000 foot view. But I do have a sick family member who has been in and out of the hospital multiple times since the beginning of January. And so you guys have seen a couple things on my Instagram stories. There's been a lot of travel with work, family obligations. I have a couple close friends who are going through divorces right now and needing a little bit extra support. I have another friend who is celebrating buying her first home. So that's been really exciting. And then I have another one who just received a mental health disorder diagnosis, which was a bit surprising. A little bit of I think a little bit of relief for her to know she knew something was off. So I think this kind of confirmed that, but it's still a lot to process. And I'm a little bit behind on just the things I've been trying to get done because it's just been a busy season. So yeah, that's kind of the life update, I guess. And this all passes, this too shall pass. It's just kind of what's going on right now. Things are good. Things are still good, but it's just a busy season. So that can pull a little bit out of me, but that also ties in with delegating. And I kind of brushed on that. But when it comes to my own self-care and when it comes to being in a busy season, one thing, if you are listening, if you're someone like me who tends to either be the person who wants to help other people, the person who wants to show up for other people, or maybe you are the person people come to when they are in need, I will tell you the thing that's helping me is delegating. And that happens in my work life. It happens in my personal life, but anything I can to kind of, instead of taking on more on my plate, I'm trying to take stuff off of my plate. I'm going to give you a quick example just to kind of give you an idea where I don't even catch these things until I'm kind of in the thick of everything. And then I realize just how much more I'm taking on. So I mentioned that, I have a family member who's in and out of the hospital and I've got friends going through some other stuff. I had another family member that said, hey, can you text me when that family member, because they're going in for another surgery, and they said, can you text me when that family member is done with surgery? And my first thought was, of course. Yeah, of course. And then I thought, oh my gosh, you know what? I'm probably going to be so distracted that day at the hospital that I'm probably not going to think to text you because I'm going to be so worried about the patient, so worried about the family member, so worried about their care and doing all the things for them that me remembering to text you is one more thing on my plate. So instead of, adding to my plate on a crazy, crazy day in a crazy situation, instead I said, you know what? Why don't you text me on that day and text me around this time because I might forget. and I'm going to be a bit distracted. And I appreciate that you want to check in, and I want you to have a check-in answer. I want you to know that they're okay or what happened, but I don't need more on my plate. And I'm finding that delegating is definitely helping me kind of navigate this busy season. So if you are finding yourself right now also in a busy season, sometimes it's that little stuff that maybe it's, the kids are helping you out with more stuff. Maybe you are normally making their lunches, but maybe they can start making their own lunches. Maybe they can do their own laundry. Maybe they can, maybe you tend to do certain things for them all the time, but right now your partner does it, or right now they do it themselves. Or at work, you might be the go-to person at work who is known for helping with all the things. It's kind of setting that tone, because sometimes people don't realize that there are other people they can go to in the meantime. So whatever it is that you may or may not be going through, keep that in mind in the future too, that it's always okay to delegate, and it just helps you, and it still helps the people who need answers and resources and things like that, but it doesn't put it on your plate, and somebody else can help them who might not be going through such a busy season in their life. All right. So last but not least, we are at our final topic. There is a very popular podcaster who I've been following for a few years now. They're also an influencer, and I kind of use those terms interchangeably just because they do use their social media following to sell products and to promote different things. But they have a podcast, which they also sell products and promote things on. But I noticed that they were always talking about kind of selling their business and kind of moving on. And they were really excited about this possible business partnership they had coming up. And then it fell through. It unexpectedly fell through. And that happens. But then all of a sudden, they've kind of changed things. It went from, okay, I was so excited for this partnership and kind of selling off the business, and that they've created this online platform community, to now they're grateful for that, which can happen, right? That's fine. But now they're changing their tune again. And there's just a lot of different words they say that I'm noticing. One second, they're telling you that they're making, what does she always say? Is it, multiple six-figure digit income? Multiple. She says she's not where she thought she would be in life. So you hear one side of it, but then the other side of it is, but I'm not where I thought I was going to be in life. And I'm like, So it's kind of like you don't know what to believe. And I guess that's what I'm saying with this. Ironically, she has another family member who has a very public presence on social media, and her sister was kind of doing a similar thing, where her sister was promoting a business, saying how great it was to be a part of it, was constantly recruiting people to be a part of this business, saying that sometimes was even showing, and I think this is so tacky, but sometimes showing the bank statements that would hit her account. And she'd say, I woke up to $5,000 more in my bank account. Ugh. Like, first of all, okay, really. But she was sharing this all the time. And basically, if you weren't part of whatever team she was building, that, then what were you doing? Like, that was kind of like the idea she was putting out there. And I didn't like it. I'm like, okay, well, you're doing something that I think a lot of people see through, and that's why they're not jumping on board. But what I did find ironic is the sister kind of disappeared for a while. She came back a few months later, and she addressed her absence on social media and said that she had gotten out of that business. So that business that she'd been so heavily recruiting for, she decided, I'm walking away from it. But again, if you're waking up to $5,000 in your bank account and it's just the best thing since sliced bread, why are you walking away from it? Right? So I just kind of feel there's a lot of this happening on social media. And I just share that with you guys because I'm sure some of you have seen this. I'm seeing it too. And I'm just saying, just be careful, still enjoy the content, still be there for people and support. And I still love, I still follow both of these folks actually. But I feel like a little bit of the credibility is lost. And I also feel that people will want you to look a certain way on social media. I think social media is the highlight reel, right? They don't always share with you the hard stuff, the bad stuff, the stuff that goes wrong, which is one of the reasons I wanted to record this episode, is to tell you, the stuff is not always easy, right? It's not. Like, it's 7:00 at night. I still haven't had dinner, and I want to go sit on the couch and relax for the rest of my weekend. That's what I want to do. But I also want to get a podcast episode out to you guys and tell you like the real stuff that's been going on. So I think it's good to be real with people. I think people want to know that, hey, we're all human. We're all, we have struggles. We're all going through stuff, right? We have busy seasons and all that kind of stuff. I think it's important to share that. But then you see people on social media who just kind of put these filters on and make you think that life is a different way. And I will share one last thing. One of my previous guests said something that I've since made kind of a post on my Piece of Me podcast Instagram page. And he said, life doesn't always have to look Instagrammable. And it was the first time I'd ever heard that. I was like, whoa, is that an adjective? Everything doesn't have to be Instagrammable. And he had such a point with that. Now, I don't know if he stole that from somewhere or if I'm just late to the party, but wow, it's true. Again, sometimes we forget that social media is edited, filtered content. It is. So I share that not to, again, throw shade at those folks that whose stories I just shared with you. That's why I left their names out. We forget when we do spend so much time on social media that what we're consuming, we think it's real. It's not real. So just whatever you're looking at or reading or listening to, take it with a grain. We're all just humans out here just trying to navigate this thing we call life. And we're enjoying, hopefully, the process, enjoying the experience, learning, growing, figuring things out, hopefully living our best lives. And that's really what we're doing. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope that if you were in the middle of winter, that you're doing okay. You're hanging in there. I know the winter blues are a thing. Next week, we are going to get back into our queue of podcast guests. So lots of good stuff coming. Everything from burnout to like wound healing, like inner experience wound healing. I've got, who else do I have in the queue? I've got a lot of people in the queue. A lot of people I've recorded who have a really great stuff coming and some stuff you're not going to expect to. So good stuff is coming your way. Thank you to those who are supporting the show. Thank you for following. Thank you for sharing, downloading, all the stuff that you're doing. I do appreciate you so much. And I thank you for being here. And as always, I will talk to you in the next episode. To be part of the exclusive listener group, hit the follow button on whichever podcast platform you're listening to right now. When you follow, you'll be the first to know about new episodes so you can listen before anyone else. You'll also have quick access to the show, making it convenient to find for the next time. For more free content, join me on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and online at pieceofmepodcast.com.